still before they could hurt you. Alone. Do you think anyone deserves to be alone? Resistance, not a lot of support.
Sure. Why not? You know, I'm here.
But we have a few minutes. And I'll be Barbara.
It is my house. Things escalate.
And how do you feel? Maybe if you'd come home earlier, we could have spent to find a few.
Well, it was a hard day. You think while you're gallivanting around campus like a 30-year-old friend. I thought that's what you always wanted. Classic styles of yesterday.
Are we going again?
No.
Don't know. Fluorescence must be tripping a break.
Maybe I didn't notice. Like I say, I'm not. But power's on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stepping into it. Maybe. That small blip is not an asteroid, it's a spaceship, and it's on a...
So that you can reclaim that way and free to choose the path of your own.
Hey there, cowboys and cowgirls! Are you looking to rock?
The lights die in the middle of Clark's smile. 1 second, he is dressed like a bargain bin pirate, pointing at a red sofa beneath a cardboard ship's wheel. The next, the furniture showroom is swallowed by darkness. Somewhere below the floor, metal groans. Not the settling creak of an old building. Something deeper. Something moving. Clark freezes, plastic sword raised while the camera keeps recording. Then the fluorescent tubes blink back on, and everyone laughs because laughing is easier than admitting the room suddenly feels wrong. But Clark doesn't laugh. He stares toward the basement door. It is standing open. Long before that door opened, Clark was already living inside rooms that belonged to nobody. Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire had once been his desperate second chance. Now it was a graveyard of unsold couches, fake bedrooms, and lamps glowing for customers who never came. He slept on whichever mattress looked least humiliating and hid empty bottles behind display cabinets. He had trained to become an architect, a man who believed walls could shape lives. Then his marriage collapsed, his career vanished, and the only building left under his control was a pirate-themed furniture store, sinking one unpaid bill at a time. Bobby and Kat, his young employees, moved around him with the patience people use near broken glass. They helped film commercials while Clark shouted about treasure-worthy discounts and waved his plastic sword. On camera, he boomed, grinned, promised families the perfect home. Off camera, his shoulders folded inward. The performance ended, and silence returned, heavier than before. Kat noticed the lights flickering again. Bobby joked the building was haunted. Clark snapped, then apologized without meeting his eyes. Beneath the humor, all three heard it. A faint electrical hum coming from somewhere the basement should not have extended. At therapy, Dr. Mary Kline watched Clark rub a dark stain from his pirate coat. He talked about his ex-wife, money, and how everyone mistook bad luck for personal failure. Mary listened, but her fingers tightened around her pen whenever he described feeling trapped indoors. Something hid inside that reaction, a memory locked behind her calm voice. Clark told her the store sometimes felt larger at night, as though corridors stretched when nobody watched. Mary asked how much he had been drinking. His jaw hardened. "I'm not imagining it," he said. Mary held his gaze. She believed his fear. She just did not believe his explanation. That night, the power fails again. No warning, no storm. The showroom goes black, and emergency signs glow red across rows of empty beds. Clark takes a flashlight and follows the hum past the loading area, down concrete steps into the basement. Each step makes the sound louder until it vibrates through his teeth. The circuit breaker looks normal, but beside it, a section of wall is damp and yellowed, as if it aged 50 years overnight. He presses his palm against it. The surface bends. Not cracks. Bends. His hand sinks through wallpaper that should be solid concrete, and cold air curls around his wrist. Clark jerks back, breathing hard. Every sensible instinct tells him to call someone, seal the basement, and never touch that wall again. Instead, he pushes forward. This is a mistake. He knows it. His shoulder passes through first, then his face, and the world changes without transition. Concrete becomes damp carpet. The basement ceiling rises into a grid of buzzing fluorescent panels. Yellow walls divide a space too wide, too deep, too impossible to exist beneath his store. Clark turns around. The opening is still there, a trembling patch of darkness in the wallpaper. He could step back. He almost does. Then, somewhere beyond the nearest corner, a telephone begins ringing. There is no telephone. Clark follows the ringing, moving through room after room while his flashlight trembles. The place resembles an office remembered by something that has never worked in one. Doors open into smaller doors. Hallways bend back toward themselves. A dining chair sits alone beneath a ceiling vent, whispering warm air. Farther in, he finds couches from his showroom stacked into a towering knot, wooden legs piercing cushions like broken bones. The ringing stops. Silence. Then he hears his own commercial jingle drifting through the maze, slow and warped, as if the building has been listening to him for years. Clark whispers, "Hello?" The jingle dies. A shadow slides across the far doorway, but nothing enters. He steps closer and finds footprints pressed into the wet carpet. Bare feet. Too long. They lead away from him, then suddenly reverse and return, stopping directly in front of his shoes. Clark cannot breathe. Behind him, the fluorescent hum cuts out one row at a time. Darkness advances across the ceiling. Click. 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 He spins toward the wall where he entered. The opening is gone. In its place, someone has drawn a crooked black arrow pointing deeper into the maze. Beneath it are 4 words. "Clark, you came back." Clark backs away from the message until his shoulder strikes the wall. The wallpaper is warm, almost skin warm. His name sits there in black strokes, dripping slowly toward the carpet, though the ink has nowhere to come from. "Came back?" he whispers. The words feel wrong in his mouth. He has never seen this place, never walked these yellow corridors. Yet somewhere beneath the panic, something older stirs. A smell of wet carpet, a buzzing light. The memory of being small and calling for someone who never answered. Then the darkness reaches him. Every fluorescent panel shuts off at once, and from the hall ahead comes the soft slap of bare feet. Clark runs. His flashlight beam jerks across walls that seem to rearrange between breaths. Left, right, another right. He passes the same chair 3 times, except each time it faces a different direction. The footsteps behind him never speed up. They do not need to. They keep the same calm rhythm, as if whatever follows already knows where Clark will end. He throws himself through a narrow doorway and slams it shut. On the other side, something stops. Silence. Clark presses both hands over his mouth. The knob does not turn. Nothing scratches the wood. Instead, his phone rings inside his pocket. The screen shows Bobby's name. Clark answers with shaking fingers. "Bobby, listen to me. Go upstairs. Lock the basement." Only static replies. Then Bobby's voice pushes through, stretched and distant. "Clark, where are you?" "I don't know. I went through the wall. There are rooms down here." A long pause. "Clark," Bobby says, quieter now, "you've been gone for 11 hours. Clark checks the time. His phone still reads 9:17 p.m., the exact minute he entered. Before he can speak, another voice appears beneath Bobby's, a child whispering close to the receiver. "Don't let him find the red room." The call dies. Outside the door, the bare feet begin walking again, away this time. Clark waits until the sound fades, then opens the door. The hallway beyond has changed. The yellow wallpaper is gone, replaced by pale blue walls and framed paintings of sailboats under gray skies. The carpet is dry. The air smells faintly of dust and oranges. Ahead, a lamp glows beside a staircase leading upward. For one dangerous second, hope floods through him. This could be the store, an office, a way out. He climbs, taking the steps 2 at a time, and emerges into a room that punches the breath from his lungs. It is his old living room. Not similar. Exact. The green couch his wife hated. The cracked lamp they promised to replace. The little wooden horse his daughter once dragged everywhere by a string. Clark stands frozen in the doorway while memories move through him like knives. Sunday mornings, burned toast. His daughter laughing from beneath a blanket. His wife asking him to stop drinking. The final night, when every sentence became a weapon, he reaches for the wooden horse. The moment his fingers touch it, a child laughs somewhere upstairs. "Lucy?" The name escapes before he can stop it. Clark's daughter has not spoken to him in 3 years. He climbs toward the sound, slower now. Each step creaks exactly as it did in the old house. At the top, family photographs line the hallway, but the faces have been scratched away, all except Clark's. In every picture, he stares directly at the camera, older and more exhausted each time. One frame shows him standing in the furniture store basement. Another shows him entering the yellow corridor. The last photograph has not happened yet. Clark is kneeling inside a red room, holding someone's hand while darkness pours from his mouth. The child laughs again behind a closed bedroom door. Clark grips the knob. "Lucy? Dad?" comes the answer. His knees nearly give out. That voice. Older now, but still hers. Frightened. Trying not to cry, Clark opens the door and finds a narrow room lit by a single bedside lamp. Lucy sits with her back to him, wearing the blue sweater she wore the last Christmas they spent together. Her shoulders tremble. He steps closer. "I'm here." She turns. Her face is blurred, smooth, and unfinished, like wet paint dragged by a careless hand. Yet her voice remains perfect. "You left me here?" Clark stumbles backward. The thing wearing Lucy's shape rises. Its arms hang too low. Its head tilts with a wet crack. Then the walls around them begin pulsing, and the blue paint peels away in strips, revealing red wallpaper underneath. The red room. From inside the closet, someone starts pounding. 3 desperate hits. Then Bobby screams Clark's name. Clark lunges for the closet, but the faceless thing wearing Lucy's body moves first. Its fingers close around his wrist, cold and soft, sinking slightly into his skin. He twists free and drives his shoulder into the closet door. It bursts inward. No clothes, no shelves. Just another corridor descending at a sharp angle, red walls narrowing around a trail of blood. Bobby's scream echoes from somewhere below. "Clark!" He dives into the passage. Behind him, Lucy's voice changes. It becomes younger, smaller. "Dad, please don't leave me again." Clark stops. That sentence once came through a locked bathroom door while his real daughter cried on the other side. He had been drunk, angry, too ashamed to face her. By morning, Lucy and her mother were gone. Clark never told anyone what happened that night. Not Mary, not Bobby, not even himself, not in words. Yet this place knew. It had reached into the one memory he kept buried and pressed its thumb directly into the wound. The thing behind him laughs. Clark runs harder. The red corridor spills him into a vast storage hall. Towers of furniture rise beneath a ceiling lost in shadow. Sofas, wardrobes, dining tables, children's beds. All from his store, but ruined by age. Mold blooms across cushions. Wooden frames bend as though crushed under invisible weight. Between the stacks, fluorescent lights flicker in long rows, revealing Bobby tied to a chair with black electrical cords wrapped around his chest. Kat kneels beside him, trying to cut the wires with a broken piece of glass. Clark nearly collapses from relief. "How did you get here?" Kat looks up. Face streaked with sweat. The wall opened again. "Bobby went after you. I went after Bobby. You were supposed to lock the basement." "We did." Her voice cracks. "It opened upstairs." Bobby's eyes flutter. Blood runs from his nose. He forces a weak smile. "Good news. Your store has more floor space than we thought." Clark drops beside him and tears at the cords. They cling like wet roots, tightening whenever he pulls. Beneath Bobby's shirt, something pulses in rhythm with the lights. Kat grabs Clark's hand. "Stop!" It reacts to fear. Clark stares at her. "How do you know that?" She does not answer. There it is. A tiny hesitation. Barely a second. But Clark sees it. Kat has always been the quiet one, the employee who remembers every delivery, every unpaid invoice, every apology Clark forgets making. She is 22, sharp-eyed, and far too patient for a dead-end furniture job. Clark assumed she stayed because she needed the money. Now, in the middle of an impossible room, she looks less terrified than prepared. "What aren't you telling me?" he asks. A crash rolls through the storage hall. Somewhere behind the furniture towers, something heavy begins dragging itself across the floor. Kat presses the glass against the cords again. "Not now, Kat." "My brother disappeared in this building 8 years ago." The words land harder than the scream that follows them. Clark goes still. 8 years ago, before he bought the store, the property had been an abandoned office complex. The realtor said nothing about a missing person. No police reports. No warnings. Just a price low enough to feel like rescue. Kat keeps cutting. He was 14. Everyone said he ran away. "I found his camera in the basement. The last recording showed a yellow hallway that wasn't on any blueprint. Clark looks around at the endless dark. You knew this was here? I knew something was here. Her jaw tightens. I took this job because the building changed owners. Because you started sleeping inside it. Because I thought sooner or later the door would open again. Betrayal burns through Clark's fear. Every late shift. Every basement repair. Every time Kat asked whether he heard humming at night. None of it had been concern. You used me. Kat finally meets his eyes. I watched you for 2 years to make sure you weren't the reason it opened. Before Clark can answer, Bobby gasps. His back arches. The cords sink beneath his skin, vanishing one by one. The lights above them flash red, and a deep voice rolls from hidden speakers. 3 returned. 1 remains. Furniture crashes behind them. A shape unfolds between 2 wardrobes. 2 tall, all joints and pale limbs, with a human face stretched across its chest. Bobby convulses once, then goes limp. Clark grabs him. Bobby, look at me. Bobby's eyes open. They are no longer brown. They glow the same sick yellow as the first hallway. He smiles, but the voice that comes out belongs to a child. Kat, it whispers. Your brother found the red room. The creature in the shadows begins to run. Kat slices the final cord. Clark throws Bobby over his shoulder, and the 3 of them race between collapsing furniture stacks. The floor shakes. Lights burst overhead. Ahead, a steel door appears where no door stood before. Kat reaches it first and slams her palm against the handle. Locked. On the other side, someone knocks 3 times. Then a boy's voice says, Kat, don't open it. I'm not alone. The boy's voice comes again through the steel door, thin and breathless. Kat, move away. Kat's hand stays on the handle. Every muscle in her arm locks. For 8 years, she has imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways. Her brother alive, older, waiting to be found. But the voice beyond the door still sounds 14. Exactly 14. Clark sees hope flash across her face, then fracture. Ellie, she whispers. Something slams into the door from the other side. The metal bends outward. Kat jumps back as a black hand punches through the gap, fingers searching blindly. Not human fingers. Too many joints, too long. The pale creature behind them closes in, knocking wardrobes aside like cardboard. Clark shifts Bobby's weight across his shoulders. Pick a direction. There isn't one, Kat says. But Bobby lifts his head. His yellow eyes stare past Clark toward a blank wall. There, a doorway appears. No sound, no movement. 1 second, solid concrete. The next, a narrow white door with a brass handle, glowing beneath a single light. Clark does not trust it. He trusts the creature less. They run. The moment Kat crosses the threshold, the storage hall vanishes. The crashing furniture cuts off mid-impact. Clark stumbles into a quiet office with gray carpet, humming computers, and fluorescent lights that do not flicker. Bobby slides from his shoulders and lands coughing on the floor. Kat slams the door behind them. The pale creature never follows. For a moment, nobody moves. Then one of the computers wakes. A video begins playing. The screen shows the furniture store basement from years ago. The image shakes as a boy carries the camera down the steps. Eli, 14 years old, nervous, whispering to himself. He reaches the yellow wall, presses his hand against it. The surface bends. Kat steps closer. Ellie. On screen, her brother passes through, but he is not alone. A woman follows him. Dr. Mary Kline, younger, hair shorter, face pale with fear. Clark feels the room tilt. Mary enters the yellow corridor carrying a red notebook and a small black device covered in blinking lights. She does not look surprised by the impossible space. She looks like someone returning to a place she knows too well. The recording jumps. Now Eli is crying. Mary grips his shoulders and tells him to stay calm. Behind them, something pounds through the walls. The structure responds to memory. She says into the camera. Fear gives it form. Guilt gives it doors. Clark's skin turns cold. The video jumps again. Eli is gone. Mary stands alone in a red room, staring directly into the camera. Her hands are covered in blood. I'm sorry, she whispers. I needed someone it could hold instead of me. Kat stops breathing. The screen goes black. Silence. Then every computer in the room turns on at once. Each screen shows a different memory from Clark's life. His wedding, Lucy's birth, the first drink he hid, the night his wife left, therapy sessions with Mary, every secret, every failure, and in the corner of every image stands the same blurred figure, Mary. Clark steps back. She knew. Kat's face empties. Grief burns out, leaving something sharper. She fed my brother to this place. Bobby laughs. Not his laugh. The child's voice returns through his mouth. She fed many. Clark turns. Bobby stands slowly. His movements are stiff, almost rehearsed. Yellow light leaks from beneath his eyelids. She found the door when she was young, he says. She learned what it wanted. What does it want? Clark asks. Bobby's head tilts. A home. The office walls begin to breathe. Gray paint ripples. The computers sink into the desks as though melting. Beneath the carpet, something huge shifts from one side of the room to the other. Kat grabs the red notebook lying beside the keyboard, the same one Mary carried in the recording. Its pages are filled with floor plans, names, dates, and circles drawn around Clark's address, his store, his daughter's school. One sentence is underlined again and again. The architect can close it. Clark stares at the words. His training, his career, his obsession with rooms and structures. Mary never chose him as a patient because he was broken. She chose him because he could build. The door behind them unlocks with a soft click. Mary stands on the other side. Her face is wet with tears, but her hand holds a pistol. Clark, she says, you were never supposed to find out this early. Then she points the gun at Kat. Mary fires. Kat drops before the gunshot finishes echoing. Clark sees the flash, feels heat brush his cheek, and hears the bullet bury itself in the wall behind her. Kat is still alive. She rolled. Fast. Mary's arm shifts for a second shot, but Clark hits her from the side. The pistol skids across the floor and disappears beneath a desk that is already sinking into the carpet. Mary claws at his face. Clark grabs her wrist. For one violent moment, therapist and patient are no longer pretending to be civilized. You chose me, he growls. Mary's eyes flick toward the red notebook in Kat's hands. I chose someone who might survive. The breathing walls contract. Desks splinter. Ceiling panels bow downward. Bobby stands in the center of the room, perfectly still, yellow light pouring from his eyes as the office folds around him. His voice comes from everywhere now. Build. Mary stops fighting. That single word frightens her more than the gun. She shoves Clark away and scrambles toward the door. Kat catches her by the coat, slamming her into the frame. My brother, Kat says. Her voice barely rises above a whisper. Where is he? Mary looks at her, and whatever answer she carries destroys the last hardness in her face. Everywhere. Kat strikes her. The room splits open. A crack races through the floor, tearing carpet and concrete apart. Beneath it is not darkness but another level. A sprawling maze of red rooms, staircases, and corridors shifting like machinery. Clark sees doors opening and closing hundreds of feet below. People move inside them. Some run, some crawl. Some simply stand facing the walls. One of them is a boy in a gray jacket. Ellie, Kat screams. She dives toward the opening. Clark catches her belt inches before she falls. The boy below looks up. Though years have passed outside, his face has not aged. His mouth moves soundlessly. Then a red wall slides between them. Kat fights Clark's grip. Let me go. You'll die. I've been waiting 8 years. The floor groans again. Clark pulls her back as the crack seals, leaving only smooth gray carpet. Kat strikes his chest once, then collapses against him, trembling so hard her teeth knock together. Mary retrieves the notebook. We have minutes, she says. Maybe less. Kat turns with murder in her eyes. Mary does not flinch. Kill me later. Right now, this place is waking up. Clark looks toward Bobby. What did it do to him? It is using him as a mouth. And Eli? A foundation. Mary opens the notebook to a set of drawings. Circles within corridors, rooms linked by impossible angles, a central chamber marked with a black square. She points to the center. The backrooms do not exist beneath your store. Your store exists above an entry point. This place has no fixed size. It grows through human memory, building copies of rooms where fear, shame, or grief left the deepest marks. Every person trapped here gives it more material. Clark remembers his living room, Lucy's voice, the photographs. Mary continues. Most people get lost. A few become anchors. Their memories stabilize entire sections. Eli became one. Bobby is becoming another. Kat wipes blood from her lip. Then we cut them loose. You cannot cut a foundation out of a building without bringing everything down. Clark looks at the diagrams. Unless you control the collapse. Mary's eyes meet his. That was why she found him. Not because he was weak, because he understood load, stress, structure. Because once, before alcohol and failure hollowed him out, Clark could look at a building and see how every weight traveled through it. The walls pulse faster. A siren begins somewhere beyond the office. Mary flips to the final pages. There is a central room, the first stable space it ever created. Reach it, redesign the pathways, and you could force every level to fold inward. You could also crush everyone trapped inside. Bobby's body jerks. Black lines spread beneath the skin of his neck. Clark kneels beside him. Bobby, can you hear me? For a second, the yellow light fades. Bobby's real eyes return. Boss? His voice is tiny. Clark grips his shoulders. I'm here. It keeps showing me my mother. Clark has never heard Bobby speak about her. He only knows she died when Bobby was 12. She says I can stay, Bobby whispers. She says nobody leaves me here. The yellow light surges back. Bobby screams, and the office windows burst outward, though there is nothing beyond them except endless black. Mary grabs Clark. We move now. They cross the doorway into a corridor lined with thousands of clocks. Every clock shows a different time. Some spin backward, others tick too fast. A digital display above them flashes a countdown. 00:31:48. Kat stares. What happens at 0? Mary answers without slowing. The entry point seals. Clark feels a flicker of relief. Then it's contained. No, the opposite. Your store becomes the new center. Images flash across the corridor walls. Bobby ringing up customers, Kat unlocking the front entrance, families testing mattresses, children hiding inside wardrobes. The Backrooms has been studying every person who entered the store, mapping them, learning them. If the countdown ends, the building will not disappear. It will open. Every door in the showroom will lead somewhere else. Every customer inside will become another memory, another room, another foundation. Clark runs faster. The corridor narrows into a concrete tunnel filled with warm water. Lights flicker beneath the surface. Something brushes Clark's ankle. Then another shape moves between Mary and Kat. A hand breaks the water. It grabs Kat and drags her under. Clark dives, catching only her fingertips. Beneath the surface, dozens of pale faces stare upward with open eyes. Eli is among them. Kat reaches for him. The countdown drops below 30 minutes, and Bobby, standing at the tunnel entrance, closes the door behind them. The door slams. Bobby's silhouette disappears behind frosted glass, and the lock turns by itself. Clark plunges both arms into the warm water, fingers sweeping through hair, fabric, skin. Kat's hand slips from his grasp. Beneath the surface, the pale faces drift closer, their mouths open in unison. No bubbles, no sound, just rows of dead eyes and one familiar boy reaching for his sister Eli. Kat stops fighting. That terrifies Clark more than the drowning. He dives. The water changes the instant his head goes under. The concrete tunnel vanishes. He is floating inside a dark house, surrounded by fragments of bedrooms, kitchens, staircases, all suspended like wreckage. Voices whisper from every direction. Thousands of people reliving the moment they were taken. Kat drifts toward Eli. Her brother looks exactly as he did 8 years ago. Wet hair, gray jacket, a cut above his eyebrow. He raises one hand and places it against hers. For a moment, they are children again. Then Clark sees the black cords growing from Eli's spine. They stretch into the darkness, thicker than ropes, holding entire rooms together. Mary was right. He is not trapped in this place. He is part of it. Clark kicks forward and grabs Kat around the waist. She thrashes, reaching for her brother. Eli's face twists with panic. His lips form a single word. Go. The cords snap tight. Every suspended room begins moving toward them. Clark pulls Kat upward. The surface hits like glass breaking. They burst into the tunnel, choking, as Mary drags them onto the concrete ledge. Kat curls on her side, coughing water from her lungs. Clark looks back. The faces are gone. Only their reflections remain. The countdown above the door reads 0183. Mary pounds on the lock. Bobby, open it. From the other side comes his mother's voice. You already left him once, Bobby screams. The door bends inward. Clark steps forward. Bobby, listen to me. That isn't her. Silence. Then Bobby answers in his own voice. I know. The lock clicks. Clark pulls the door open and finds Bobby on his knees, blood running from both eyes. He is holding the handle with one hand and pressing the other against his mouth to stop himself from speaking. Behind him, the corridor has changed into a black stairwell descending far below the store. Bobby points down. The center. They move. The stairs shake under each step. Walls split open, revealing pieces of their memories. Kat sees Eli's empty bedroom. Mary sees herself running from the red room. Clark sees Lucy sitting at a kitchen table, waiting for a father who never came home. He does not look away. For years, he blamed alcohol, bad luck, his wife, the collapse of his career. But the truth is uglier. He chose escape every time staying became painful. Now the backrooms offer the same choice. A door appears beside him. Warm light spills through it. Lucy stands inside. Real Lucy. Older. Tears in her eyes. "Dad, come home." Clark stops. His whole body leans toward her. Then he notices the room behind her has no shadow. He closes the door. The staircase ends at a circular chamber filled with thousands of glowing passageways. They twist through the air like veins. At the center stands a child's wooden house, small enough to fit inside a bedroom. Mary's face drains of color. That was the first room. Clark looks at her. Whose memory? Mary does not answer. Kat understands first. Yours. The chamber trembles. Mary walks toward the little house, each step slower than the last. "I was 6, she whispers. "My father locked me in a storage room. I begged the walls to take me somewhere else." The house door creaks open. Inside sits a little girl in a red dress. Mary as a child. She smiles. "You came back." Black cords explode from the house and wrap around Mary's arms, legs, throat. Kat reaches for her, but Mary shouts, "No!" The pathways above them flare yellow. Bobby collapses. Clark opens the notebook and sees the final diagram. One central anchor. One living memory holding every corridor in place. To collapse the backrooms, the first anchor must be released. Mary. She looks at Clark, cords tightening around her neck. Destroy the room. Clark stares at the child inside. The little girl begins to cry. Mary begins to choke. The countdown reaches 10 minutes, and Clark realizes the truth. Destroying the room will not only kill Mary, it will erase every person whose path began with hers, including Eli, including Bobby. Clark looks from Mary to Bobby, then to Kat. Every path ends in loss. Destroy the first room, and the backrooms collapse with everyone still connected to it. Leave it standing, and the countdown reaches 0. The furniture store opens like a wound. Hundreds enter. Then thousands. The little girl inside the wooden house begins sobbing. Mary's younger self presses both palms against the walls. "Please," she whispers, "take me somewhere else." Clark finally understands. The backrooms were not born from evil. They were born from escape. One frightened child wished for another room, and the place kept building them. Rooms for grief. Rooms for shame. Rooms for memories nobody could bear to face. Every person who ran from pain gave the maze another corridor. Clark closes the notebook. "We don't destroy the anchor," he says. Mary struggles against the cords. "Then everyone dies." "No, we change what it carries." He steps toward the house. The air thickens. Pathways whip around the chamber. The backrooms feel his decision and begin defending themselves. Walls slam down between Clark and the others. Kat drags Bobby clear as the floor splits beneath them. Clark reaches the tiny door. Inside, the child Mary sits curled in the corner. He kneels. The room smells of dust, sweat, and old wood. Fingernail scratches cover the walls. On the other side of the door, a man's voice shouts that she will stay locked in until she learns to behave. Clark does not tell her the voice is gone. To her, it is still happening. He sits beside her. "You wanted another room," he says. She nods. "One where he couldn't find me. I know. Did it work?" Clark looks through the doorway at the endless maze. "Yes," he says, and no. The child stares at him, tears shining on her face. Clark takes out his plastic pirate sword, still hanging absurdly from his belt after everything. He places it on the floor between them. "I spent years hiding too. Different rooms. Same reason." The chamber shakes harder. The countdown reaches 5 minutes. Kat screams his name. Clark keeps his eyes on the child. But a room can protect you only for a little while. After that, it becomes a cage. He holds out his hand. "You don't need another room. You need someone to open this one." The child looks toward the door. Outside, adult Mary stops fighting. Her face crumples. For the first time, she is not a doctor, a liar, or the woman who sacrificed Eli to save herself. She is the child still waiting in the dark. "I'm here," Mary whispers. Her younger self hears her. The girl stands. The black cords around Mary loosen. Across the chamber, the glowing pathways begin to flicker. Mary reaches through the doorway. The child takes her hand. Light erupts from the wooden house. Not yellow, white. The cords rip free from Bobby's body. He collapses into Kat's arms, gasping. Far above them, doors burst open across every level. Trapped people spill from red rooms, blue rooms, endless offices, flooded tunnels. Eli appears beside Kat. For one heartbeat, he is 14 again. She touches his face. I came back for you. He smiles. I know. Then time catches him. His body ages in seconds. 14 becomes 22. The years stolen from him rush across his face, not as decay but as life returning. He grabs Kat's hand as the chamber folds inward. The countdown reaches 30 seconds. Clark runs. Mary remains beside the wooden house. Come on, he shouts. She shakes her head. The first anchor is free, but the pathways still need somewhere to close. Someone must stay and hold them. Clark understands from her expression. Mary spent years feeding others to the maze because she was terrified of being alone inside it. Now she chooses it. Tell them I'm sorry, she says. The walls collapse between them. Clark, Kat, Bobby, and Eli sprint through a corridor shrinking behind their heels. Doors slam shut. Ceilings drop. The furniture showroom appears ahead through a torn patch of yellow wallpaper. 10 seconds. Bobby falls. Clark hauls him up. 5. Kat and Eli cross first. 3. Clark dives through as the wall seals behind him. Silence. Morning light pours through the store windows. The pirate ship display lies broken across the floor. Every clock reads 9:18 p.m., though the sun is rising outside. Clark turns toward the basement. Solid concrete. No doorway. No hum. Months later, the Ottoman Empire is gone. The building becomes a community center designed by Clark, filled with wide windows and doors that never lock from the outside. Bobby manages the front desk. Kat and Eli leave together each evening, still learning how to be siblings 8 years later. Lucy visits on a rainy afternoon. Clark does not ask her to forgive him. He listens. And when she finally takes his hand, he holds on without making promises he cannot prove. That night, Clark switches off the last light and stands alone in the hallway. For a moment, he hears fluorescent buzzing behind the wall. Then Mary's voice, faint but calm. Go home. Clark. He does. And for the first time in years, no door follows him. Kane Parsons did not arrive in Hollywood through film school, festival networking, or years spent directing commercials. He arrived through a yellow hallway. At 16, working largely from his bedroom, Parsons transformed a strange internet image into the Backrooms, found footage, a 9-minute YouTube short built with Blender and Adobe After Effects. The video exploded online, and studios began contacting him within a month. 4 years later, he became A24's youngest feature film director, guiding Backrooms into theaters on May 29, 2026. That journey sounds like an overnight success fantasy. Look closer, though, and it becomes a story about a teenager protecting an idea before Hollywood could flatten it. The concept existed before Parsons touched it. Its earliest recognizable form came from a 2019 post pairing an unsettling photograph with a description of endless yellow rooms, damp carpet, and fluorescent buzzing. Internet users expanded that fragment into a sprawling communal mythology. Parsons saw something beneath the monsters and invented lore. The quiet panic of entering a place that looks familiar, but follows no human logic. Why is that doorway positioned there? Why are those stairs too narrow? Where is the exit? His horror begins with architecture behaving incorrectly. The building does not need to chase you. Its very existence feels like a threat. That distinction shaped the feature's creative direction. Parsons resisted turning Backrooms into a conventional creature movie decorated with recognizable yellow wallpaper. He wanted the environment itself to remain the central disturbance, man-made enough to trigger recognition, unnatural enough to make the nervous system rebel. The rooms resemble offices, showrooms, and institutional corridors emptied of purpose. You understand every individual object. Together, they become incomprehensible. Parsons has connected that sensation to sensory deprivation. When stimulation disappears, the mind begins manufacturing danger. This is horror built not around what suddenly appears, but around how long nothing appears at all. Hollywood adaptations of internet phenomena usually begin by simplifying them. Parsons fought in the opposite direction. He described his responsibility as preserving the project's genetic makeup, refusing to let the feature become an unrelated film wearing Backrooms imagery like a costume. That meant respecting the web series without merely stretching found footage across 2 hours. He had already decided that a feature would need to leave the original camera format behind, allowing the audience to step back from raw documentation and examine the psychological, spatial, and emotional questions hidden inside the mythology. Expansion, not repetition. That became the guiding principle. His influences explain why the finished vision feels broader than an online horror adaptation. Parsons has called Valve's Portal and Half-Life fundamental parts of his creative DNA. Stories where sterile research facilities become puzzles and systems matter more than individual certainty. He also points toward Mr. Robot, particularly its obsession with paranoia, hidden structures, and people attempting to understand machinery far larger than themselves. During preparation, he rented a Vancouver theater to screen Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey. That combination is revealing: video game spatial logic, technological dread, and Kubrickian patience. The goal was not simply to frighten audiences. It was to make them contemplate the machinery of the maze. Then came the almost absurd leap in scale. The teenager who had once created hallways digitally was given approximately 30,000 square feet of physical sets, designed from his own Blender renderings. Parsons even used Blender to pre-visualize and shot list the feature, carrying the language of his homemade work directly into professional production. The technology did not replace filmmaking craft. It became his method of communicating with experienced department heads. That matters. Plenty of first-time directors enter large productions with taste, but no practical visual grammar. Parsons arrived having already constructed his universe virtually, angle by angle, long before the cameras entered it. A24 and Chernin Entertainment released the film, while producers including James Wan and Osgood Perkins surrounded Parsons with veteran experience. Yet the collaboration was not built around correcting the young filmmaker. Wan has described the project as auteur-driven, with the crew taking its lead from Parsons' vision. Parsons, meanwhile, remained willing to use the expertise around him rather than pretending age had granted him instant mastery. That balance, extreme authorship without defensive isolation, may be the most impressive part of his transition. He protected the mystery, but he did not protect his ego. The result begins with a creative contradiction. Backrooms is an internet-born film obsessed with spaces where connection disappears. Its world was collectively imagined online, yet Parsons set the story in the 1990s, removing search engines, social media explanations, and easy digital witnesses. Characters cannot upload evidence and wait for strangers to solve the puzzle. They must stand inside uncertainty. That is Parsons' real vision, not endless lore, but the terror of incomplete knowledge. And vision alone cannot sustain a feature. Beneath those fluorescent corridors, someone still had to construct a human story strong enough to keep us walking forward. A director can build the most unnerving maze imaginable, but a feature film still needs someone worth following through it. That was the central writing problem facing Backrooms. Kane Parsons' original videos worked through fragmentation, recovered tapes, corporate demonstrations, unexplained disappearances, and tiny pieces of information scattered across an invented history. A 9-minute upload could end the instant dread reached its highest point. A theatrical film could not survive on atmosphere alone. The adaptation needed characters, emotional progression, and an ending that felt intentional without explaining away the mystery. A24 officially credits Will Sudik as the screenwriter, with Parsons directing and supplying the universe, mythology, and creative direction. Sudik was a practical choice for that translation. His television credits included genre-heavy series such as Ash vs. Evil Dead, while his broader experience included psychologically layered productions connected to Homeland and Westworld. He understood serialized mystery, the art of answering one question while quietly opening 3 more. Yet the screenplay's task was stranger than adapting a novel. There was no fixed Backrooms book, no single authoritative plot, and no protagonist audiences already knew. The source material was part anonymous internet image, part communal creepypasta, and part Parsons' increasingly elaborate YouTube canon. Sudik therefore had to adapt a sensation before he could adapt a story. The solution was Clark, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, an ordinary man whose failing furniture showroom contains a doorway that should not exist. Clark is already trapped before he enters the maze. His marriage has collapsed, His dream of becoming an architect has faded, and therapy has forced him to confront patterns he would rather rationalize. That is sharp screenwriting because the external space becomes an extension of an existing condition. The backrooms do not randomly interrupt a stable life. They appear to someone emotionally stuck, professionally cornered, and obsessed with understanding where everything went wrong. A character who cannot move forward discovers a world where every corridor appears to move forward but leads nowhere. Mary, Clark's therapist, gives the narrative its second axis. Played by Renate Reinsve, she initially occupies the position of interpreter, the person expected to impose order on Clark's increasingly impossible testimony. But Mary carries her own buried trauma, meaning the relationship is never simply doctor and patient, rational observer and unstable witness. Both characters have constructed stories about their past because those stories make survival easier. The script then places them inside a dimension that reconstructs familiar objects and spaces incorrectly. Memory does the same thing. It copies, distorts, and fills gaps. Suddenly, the backrooms are not merely yellow corridors. They are a machine that weaponizes the unreliable stories people tell themselves. This gives the film a more traditional dramatic spine than the YouTube series without making it conventional. The opening establishes Clark's stagnation and the showroom's financial decline. Discovery follows. A mark on a basement wall, a surface that refuses to behave like solid matter, then the impossible crossing. From there, the screenplay alternates personal investigation with traces of Async, the secretive organization studying the phenomenon. Parsons' web series often positioned Async near the center of the mythology. The feature pushes it toward the edge, allowing new viewers to experience the space through Clark and Mary rather than through corporate exposition. The lore is present, it simply is not allowed to swallow the people. Parsons has openly rejected what he calls lore bloat. He knew dedicated fans would arrive ready to inspect logos, dates, and architectural clues, but he also knew that designing the screenplay only for those viewers would turn the movie into homework. His approach was to return to the earliest appeal of the concept: familiarity corrupted by one impossible detail. Select pieces of the existing canon could remain, especially Async, while anything requiring a 20-video explanation had to stay outside the main dramatic path. That restraint is crucial. Horror weakens when mystery becomes administration. When every nightmare receives a department name, technical diagram, and chronological wiki entry. Parsons' larger storytelling method helped maintain cohesion. He has said that he prefers beginning with the ending and working backward, establishing where the narrative must eventually arrive before planting clues throughout the journey. That philosophy suits Backrooms perfectly because the setting appears chaotic, while the screenplay quietly depends on recurrence. Rooms echo memories. Objects return in altered forms. Emotional details that initially resemble character background gradually become part of the film's spatial language. The maze feels random to the characters, but the writing cannot be random. Every repeated image must create the suspicion that the environment is observing, copying, or processing them. The screenplay is not flawless. Some emotional material is expressed more directly than the visual concept requires, and viewers drawn to the radical minimalism of the original shorts may feel that conventional backstory reduces the terror. But that compromise is also what permits the concept to sustain a feature. Sudik and Parsons do not write a 90-minute chase through fluorescent hallways. They construct a story about people becoming prisoners of their own explanations. Then place those people inside a world that turns explanation into architecture. The blueprint was finally there. What the film needed next were performers capable of making grief, obsession, and existential panic feel real inside a place that deliberately feels unreal. Casting Backrooms required a strange kind of confidence. Kane Parsons was entering his first feature production while still a teenager, yet the film needed actors capable of carrying long scenes in which architecture, not another performer, was often their primary scene partner. There would be no familiar monster constantly attacking, no conventional villain generating conflict, and no mythology-heavy dialogue to explain every disturbance. The faces had to hold the audience inside uncertainty. Casting director Whitney Horton helped assemble an ensemble led by Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renate Reinsve, with Mark Duplass, Finn Bennett, Lukita Maxwell, and Yvonne Jogia filling out the human world surrounding the maze. Ejiofor was the decisive choice. Clark could easily have become a standard horror protagonist, a troubled man who discovers something impossible, behaves irrationally, and spends the rest of the movie shouting that nobody believes him. Ejiofor brings too much emotional intelligence for that simplicity. His Oscar-nominated work in 12 Years a Slave established his ability to communicate thought through stillness, while films such as Dirty Pretty Things and The Martian showed how naturally he can make intelligence feel dramatic rather than decorative. Clark needed exactly that combination. He is educated enough to study the backrooms, wounded enough to become dependent on them, and proud enough to mistake obsession for purpose. The casting also creates useful friction between actor and material. Ejiofor admitted that he did not initially know Parsons' YouTube series, although he was vaguely aware of online interest in liminal spaces. Only after meeting the director did he begin exploring that mythology. That distance may have helped. Clark is not supposed to enter the backrooms with fan knowledge or a catalog of established rules. He encounters the place as a baffled adult trying to force impossible architecture into a rational framework. Ejiofor's own process mirrored that discovery. Curiosity first, comprehension later, certainty never. There is something almost audacious about pairing a first-time director with an actor who had already worked under Steve McQueen, Steven Spielberg, and Ridley Scott. Yet Ejiofor did not describe Parsons as an unprepared child being rescued by professionals. He responded to the young director's technical clarity and obvious excitement, particularly once the enormous practical set became available. Parsons had pre-visualized the feature in Blender, so he could communicate exactly how bodies should move through spaces he had already explored digitally. Ejiofor supplied decades of performance experience. Parsons supplied a visual world nobody else understood as completely. The age gap became part of the collaboration's energy rather than an obstacle. Renate Reinsve was an equally revealing choice for Mary. Reinsve became internationally recognized through The Worst Person in the World, where her performance could shift from impulsive comedy to quiet, emotional devastation without announcing the transition. Mary requires that same instability beneath control. As a therapist, she must appear observant, measured, and professionally guarded. As the backrooms begin attacking her sense of reality, those protections fracture. Reinsve does not play fear as a switch being flipped. She lets it spread, first through concentration, then hesitation, then the growing realization that intelligence offers no protection inside a space without rules. The role nearly carried a different energy. In May 2025, Chiwetel Ejiofor and Kristen Milioti were reported to be in early negotiations for the film. By June, A24 had officially moved forward with Ejiofor and Reinsve as the leads. No public explanation established why the earlier talks with Milioti did not result in a deal, so treating it as a dramatic replacement story would be speculation. Still, the contrast is fascinating. Milioti often radiates quick, anxious intensity. Reinsve is harder to read. She can appear emotionally exposed and completely unreachable within the same shot. For a therapist entering a world built from unstable perception, that opacity becomes an asset. Reinsve was also attracted to Parsons precisely because his creative references did not resemble those of a conventionally trained filmmaker. She praised his certainty and found it exciting that he had not absorbed the same catalog of movies most directors use as shorthand. That comment identifies the real casting challenge. Experienced actors usually rely on shared language. A director might ask for a scene to feel like Kubrick, Lynch, or early Cronenberg. Parsons' imagination had been shaped just as deeply by Blender, YouTube, Portal, and digital environments. The actors had to translate instructions emerging from a different visual generation. Reinsve did not resist that difference. She leaned into it. Mark Duplass adds another kind of credibility as Phil. Duplass has spent much of his career moving between intimate, independent dramas, unsettling genre stories, and deceptively casual characters whose friendliness hides emotional pressure. His presence helps the movie feel populated by ordinary adults rather than horror movie pieces waiting to be removed from the board. Finn Bennett, Lukita Maxwell, and Avan Jogia broaden that texture. Bennett brings the nervous volatility visible in True Detective, Night Country. Maxwell carries a youthful alertness that prevents Kat from disappearing into exposition. Jogia has the looseness required to make Naren feel like a person who existed before the plot needed him. The ensemble is deliberately mismatched. That is the point. Even the most physically unusual casting serves the film's central logic. Robert Babraki, whose extraordinary height gives him proportions that appear almost digitally manipulated, plays Pirate Clark. The choice allows the film to create bodily wrongness practically, rather than relying entirely on visual effects. A familiar human outline becomes stretched beyond comfort. It resembles Clark, but resemblance makes it worse. The Backrooms do not invent from nothing, they copy badly. Bobrachki's presence turns that principle into flesh, giving the environment a distorted human echo without reducing it to a conventional creature. This cast was not assembled around celebrity spectacle. It was built around different responses to uncertainty. Ejiofor intellectualizes it, Reinsve absorbs it, Duplass normalizes it, and the younger ensemble members give it urgency. On paper, those are smart selections. On screen, their value depends on the details, the pauses, physical reactions, and emotional fractures that keep an abstract nightmare human. And at the center of that challenge stand Ejiofor and Reinsve, two performers asked to make an impossible room feel painfully personal. The most revealing acting in Backrooms happens before anyone crosses the impossible wall. During an early therapy session, Mary asks Clark to reenact the collapse of his marriage. The exercise could have become a blunt delivery system for exposition. Instead, Chiwetel Ejiofor turns it into a small public humiliation. Clark jokes, deflects, and performs indignation as though winning the argument might retroactively repair his life. Then the bravado slips. Barely. His eyes stop meeting Mary's, his voice tightens, and the anger begins to resemble panic. Renate Reinsve does almost nothing in response, and that stillness forces Clark to hear himself. The scene establishes their entire dynamic. He floods the room. She absorbs the impact. Ejiofor's performance works because he refuses to make Clark immediately sympathetic. This man is bitter. He drinks heavily, sleeps inside the furniture showroom he owns, and speaks about his failed ambitions as though other people personally stole them. Even his ridiculous pirate advertisements carry resentment. Watch his posture during those commercials. Shoulders lifted, smile stretched too wide, enthusiasm delivered with the exhausted hostility of someone trapped inside his own brand. The humor lands, but it hurts. Ejiofor understands that Clark's tragedy is not simply that life disappointed him. He has become addicted to disappointment because it excuses him from attempting anything new. The Backrooms arrive as terror, but also as opportunity. That contradiction gives the performance its engine. When Clark first enters the yellow corridors, Ejiofor does not immediately play fear. He plays recognition without understanding. His face suggests that something inside this impossible environment has answered a question he could never articulate. Curiosity pushes past self-preservation. He examines surfaces, studies dimensions, and begins mapping the space with the dormant intensity of the architect he once hoped to become. For the first time in years, Clark is useful, awake, necessary. The actor lets purpose physically reorganize him. His walk becomes faster, his speech more precise, his eyes more alert. The maze may be destroying him, but it has also returned a version of himself he thought was gone. Ejiofor has described Clark as someone who sees the break from reality as a possible escape from himself. That idea runs through every choice. His obsession never feels like ordinary horror movie stupidity, where a character repeatedly enters danger because the plot requires another frightening scene. Clark needs the Backrooms. The place gives shape to his regret and converts private failure into a cosmic mystery. If reality itself is broken, perhaps his broken life is not entirely his fault. Ejiofor plays that seduction with disturbing tenderness. Clark begins treating the corridors less like a threat than a confidant, an endless system that asks nothing except that he keep exploring. The physical sets become crucial to that transformation. Ejiofor argued that building the Backrooms practically kept the environment tactile and gave the actors closer access to their emotions than a largely green screen production would have allowed. You can feel that contact in his performance. His hands drag across wallpaper. His body hesitates at thresholds. When he pauses, he appears to be listening not just for a creature, but for the building's intention. This is environmental acting, responding to distance, texture, temperature, and empty space as though they were dialogue cues. Critics who praised the film's restrained performances noticed the same strength. Ejiofor and Reinsve often answer terror through silence rather than exaggerated screaming, leaving the audience to imagine the thoughts racing behind their faces. Reinsve's challenge is almost the reverse. Mary begins from control. Her professional identity depends on listening without becoming overwhelmed, and Reinsve gives her a tightly managed calm that never feels completely peaceful. There is tension in the neck, caution in the eyes, a fractional delay before certain responses. Mary does not merely study Clark, she constantly monitors herself. Reinsve has described the character as someone whose psychology has been distorted by trauma, while still appearing outwardly recognizable. That is exactly how she plays her. Mary's composure is not the absence of fear. It is fear organized into routine. The backrooms become dangerous because they disrupt the structure she has built around it. Once Mary enters the maze, Reinsve avoids the obvious progression from calm therapist to screaming victim. Her fear becomes quieter as the danger grows. Breathing shallows. Her gaze fixes on details for slightly too long. She moves as though sudden speed might cause the room to notice her. One critic singled out her ability to convey primal terror without screaming, and that restraint is essential to the movie's tone. A loud performance would externalize the threat. Reinsve keeps it trapped inside her body. Your attention shifts to tiny changes. A swallowed breath, a frozen shoulder. The moment professional curiosity gives way to animal instinct. She does not tell us the space is wrong. Her nervous system does. The enormous set also appears to have genuinely affected her. Reinsve said she worried that spending time inside the 30,000 square foot labyrinth might make her feel slightly unhinged, and she avoided wandering through it alone. That anxiety gives Mary's scenes a useful immediacy. The actress is not pretending that the walls continue beyond the frame. They actually do. When she turns a corner, neither her body nor ours can completely dismiss the possibility of becoming disoriented. The performance and production design reinforce each other. Parsons creates a space capable of confusing the actor, while Reinsve converts that confusion into character psychology. The fear does not sit on top of the set, it grows out of it. Their chemistry depends on imbalance rather than warmth. Clark wants Mary to confirm that his discovery is real. Mary initially wants to understand why he needs it to be real. Ejiofor pushes, Reinsve withholds. He speaks in bursts, gathering momentum as though language can force belief into existence. She leaves gaps, and those gaps become unbearable to him. Later, as their certainty shifts, the balance changes. Clark becomes strangely calm inside the irrational world, while Mary, previously the interpreter, loses the safety of explanation. The performances cross without ever becoming mirror images. That is the film's sharpest dramatic move. Patient and therapist do not exchange roles so much as discover that both were using different methods to avoid the same emptiness. There is a fair criticism here. The screenplay sometimes moves Clark's psychological development faster than Ejiofor can fully justify, while Mary receives less dramatic space than Reinsve's performance seems capable of filling. Some reviewers found Clark's decisions inconsistent and Mary underwritten. They are not wrong. Yet the actors create continuity where the writing occasionally skips steps. Ejiofor connects Clark's curiosity to wounded pride, then wounded pride to dependency. Reinsve turns limited exposition into guarded behavior, making Mary feel more complicated than her dialogue alone suggests. The film survives its thinnest character writing because both performers understand the central fear. What happens when the thing ruining you is also the only thing making you feel alive? Ejiofor has said that acting begins by finding the connection between a character's fear and his own. Backrooms gives him an unusually abstract fear, meaninglessness, and he makes it painfully concrete. Reinsve responds with equal precision, transforming psychological containment into physical tension. Together, they prevent the movie from becoming a beautifully designed screensaver. Yet even performances this controlled need pressure from the people around them. Employees, researchers, partners, and distorted reflections who complicate the central relationship. The maze may isolate Clark and Mary, but the ensemble determines what remains of the world outside it, and what follows them inside. The supporting cast enters Backrooms through comedy, which is exactly why the horror hurts. Bobby and Kat first belong to the humiliatingly ordinary world of Clark's furniture store, where declining sales have reduced their boss to filming a pirate-themed television advertisement. Finn Bennett's Bobby treats the production with the loose amusement of an employee who knows the business is sinking but still wants to enjoy the spectacle. Lukita Maxwell's Kat is more attentive. She helps Clark without fully joining his delusion, watching him with a mixture of loyalty, concern, and second-hand embarrassment. Before the maze threatens them, they make the showroom feel inhabited. Messy. Human. That normality gives the empty rooms something to erase. Bennett plays Bobby as casual without making him stupid. He is introduced as the more laid-back half of the young couple, and his relaxed energy initially punctures Clark's self-importance. When Clark asks Bobby and Kat to bring a video camera into the hidden dimension, Bobby responds like someone agreeing to help with an eccentric after-hours project, not volunteering for an expedition beyond reality. That choice matters. If he began terrified, the Backrooms would only confirm his expectations. Instead, Bennett gives us curiosity turning into discomfort one room at a time. The jokes thin out, his movements become less loose. Suddenly, the young man who seemed incapable of taking anything seriously understands the danger first. His chemistry with Maxwell creates the film's most recognizable relationship. Bobby and Kat speak with the shorthand of people accustomed to sharing cramped spaces, boring shifts, and somebody else's failing business. They do not deliver romantic speeches because they do not need to. A glance can communicate disagreement. A change in tone can signal that one of them wants to leave. Parsons uses that familiarity as a pressure gauge. As the architecture becomes less comprehensible, they look toward each other for confirmation that their senses still work. Clark studies the maze. Bobby and Kat study each other. That difference makes them emotionally vulnerable in a way Clark, already surrendering to obsession, no longer is. Maxwell gets the stronger dramatic progression. Kat begins as the sensible employee, but sensible never becomes passive. She questions Clark, handles the camera, and reacts to danger with practical urgency rather than theatrical panic. Maxwell has a naturally alert screen presence. Even when Kat says little, her attention keeps moving. Doorway. Ceiling. Bobby. Clark. Back again. You can watch her calculation changing as the group goes deeper. At first, she is deciding whether Clark is confused, then whether the place is dangerous. Finally, whether Clark himself can still be trusted. The performance turns observation into suspense. Kat is not simply trapped in the maze. She is trapped with a boss whose emotional need to continue outweighs everyone else's safety. That is where the supporting characters become essential to Clark's characterization. He describes himself as someone damaged by circumstances, yet Bobby and Kat expose the harm he causes while insisting he is only searching for answers. They have less authority, less information, and fewer emotional reasons to enter the Backrooms, but he pulls them into it anyway. Their fear becomes evidence against his self-image. Clark believes he is rediscovering his architectural purpose. From their perspective, he is an employer using loyalty as permission. Ejiofor can play Clark's obsession from the inside. Bennett and Maxwell show us its cost from the outside. Without them, his descent might look romantic. With them, it becomes selfish. Mark Duplass operates at the opposite end of the ensemble. His fill appears sparingly, often through surveillance material connected to Async, before emerging as a scientist involved in the organization's study of the Backrooms. Duplass plays institutional secrecy without turning Phil into a melodramatic conspiracy villain. His manner is controlled, almost reassuring. That is worse. He speaks like someone who has spent years standing beside the impossible and has converted terror into procedure. Async once produced medical imaging technology, but after discovering the Backrooms, it redirected itself toward investigating the dimension, without achieving genuine understanding. Phil has access, equipment, and authority. Certainty? None. Duplass is perfectly suited to that ambiguity. His performances often make casual friendliness feel slightly invasive, and Phil weaponizes the same quality. He does not need to threaten anyone directly because the sealed rooms, cameras, and protective suits already communicate the power imbalance. When he explains what Async knows, the calm delivery cannot disguise the terrifying truth. The institution monitoring this phenomenon may be only marginally less confused than the people trapped inside it. The role risks becoming late-arriving exposition, and some critics felt the research company material was underdeveloped. Duplass survives that problem by making Phil feel like a man withholding more than the screenplay allows him to say. Avon Jogia's Naren Warren occupies far less screen time but performs a crucial tonal function. The opening places the audience inside an async expedition before Clark's story begins, connecting the feature to the recovered footage language of Parsons' web series. Jogia has little opportunity for conventional characterization. His body, breathing, and camera movement must carry the sequence. Naren is less a fully developed supporting protagonist than a warning transmitted from another narrative. He proves that Clark is not discovering an untouched miracle. Other people entered first. They brought technology, procedures, and confidence. The Backrooms swallowed all three. Jogia's presence gives longtime viewers a lore connection while giving newcomers an immediate lesson in helplessness. Even Robert Babraki's Pirate Clark belongs to the ensemble's larger pattern of distorted relationships. Bobby and Kat reflect what Clark does to other people. Phil reflects the false security of institutional knowledge. Naren reflects the explorers who came before him. Pirate Clark reflects Clark himself, but stretched into something physically impossible. The supporting cast therefore does more than fill the spaces around two leads. Each performer offers a different response to the unknown: humor, loyalty, procedure, panic, or imitation. Together, they make the Backrooms feel capable of corrupting not only architecture but every form of human connection. And that corruption becomes visible because the physical world surrounding them, the furniture, corridors, wallpaper, and impossible replicas, has been designed with obsessive precision. The defining image of Backrooms looks almost insultingly simple. Yellow wallpaper, damp-looking carpet, fluorescent ceiling panels, and corridors leading nowhere. Recreate it badly, and the movie becomes a themed escape room. Polish it too much, and the internet-born ugliness disappears. Production designer Danny Vermette therefore faced a harder task than building an obviously spectacular fantasy world. He had to reproduce visual mediocrity with extraordinary precision. Working with art director Alan Dirksen and set decorator Trevor Johnston, Vermette turned Kane Parsons' digitally designed environment into approximately 30 square feet of practical construction spread across 4 Vancouver sound stages. The emptiness was expensive. The blandness was engineered. Parsons began by designing his ideal labyrinth in Blender, the same software that had allowed him to create the original YouTube series. His proposed layout reached roughly 100,000 square feet. The file was so enormous that it crashed Vermette's computer and had to be separated into manageable sections. Budget and stage space reduced the physical construction, but that limitation forced the team to identify which rooms needed genuine depth, which transitions demanded actor interaction, and where visual effects could extend the illusion. Parsons did not arrive with a few sketches and a mood board. He arrived with a navigable world. The production department's job was to translate digital spatial logic into wood, fabric, steel, and carpet. That translation depended on repetition, but never exact repetition. Corridors narrow by degrees. Ceiling heights feel subtly wrong. Corners interrupt expected sightlines. Ramps, platforms, slopes, and layered levels prevent the maze from remaining a flat grid of office rooms. Vermette wanted the actors to climb, crawl, and squeeze through spaces that physically disturbed their balance. This is where the design escapes the obvious endless hallway interpretation. The Backrooms are not simply large. They reject ergonomic sense. Stairs, openings, and floor levels appear to have been constructed without considering the human body, creating the impression that no person designed them at all. The architecture resembles a memory of architecture assembled by something that never had to live inside a building. Then there is the yellow, sickly, familiar, almost warm, and completely unbearable after prolonged exposure. The team spent about a month developing the wallpaper, reportedly producing dozens of variations and camera tests before finding a pattern and tone that matched the degraded digital character of Parsons' shorts. Vermette understood that the original image's color may have resulted partly from incorrect white balance. The real room was probably closer to beige. But accuracy to the physical location was irrelevant. The corrupted photograph had become the mythology. The feature had to reproduce not the room as it existed, but the room as the internet remembered it. The scale behind that ugliness is almost comic. The production printed tens of thousands of square feet of wallpaper and laid approximately 27,000 square feet of carpeting. Large sections of dropped ceiling also had to remain structurally secure while accommodating lights, camera routes, and breakaway points. Empty sets reveal every flaw. There are no decorative objects or busy backgrounds available to conceal joins and supports. That exposure becomes part of the film's visual tension. Look closely, and everything appears cheaply manufactured. Look longer, and the construction becomes impossibly continuous. The audience recognizes the materials from offices, waiting rooms, and budget hotels, but cannot imagine the human purpose behind arranging them this way. The real world receives equal attention, because the backrooms only feel uncanny when ordinary life has first been made concrete. Clark's furniture showroom is filled with boxy televisions, floral upholstery, fake wood finishes, bargain signage, and display bedrooms that promise comfort without containing any real domestic life. Vermette's team searched for mint-condition 1990s furniture, while the graphic design embraced the desperate visual language of failing retail. Oversized slogans, easy credit promises, and merchandise arranged to simulate homes nobody actually inhabits. Clark eventually sleeps in a floor model bed surrounded by display lamps. Funny at first glance. Devastating after a second. He already lives inside artificial rooms before discovering the infinite version beneath them. Color quietly guides that descent. The showroom's upper level leans into defeated grays and blues, reflecting Clark's emotional stagnation. In the basement, those tones drift toward beige before surrendering to the backroom's yellow. The transition does not feel like crossing from reality into fantasy. It feels like reality becoming progressively less healthy. That is a smarter choice. A dramatic burst of supernatural color would create separation. Vermette instead designs a contamination. The impossible world seems to have been waiting inside the ordinary one all along, hidden within its cheap materials and neglected corners. The portal is frightening because the visual language on both sides already belongs to Clark. As the film moves deeper, recognizable spaces and objects return in damaged forms. Furniture becomes partially consumed by floors or walls. Domestic environments are copied without understanding their emotional purpose. The design follows the mechanics of fading memory. First, the broad shape survives, then dimensions drift, details disappear, and relationships between objects stop making sense. A sofa remains a sofa, but its position feels impossible. A childhood room returns, but only as an architectural approximation. Here the backrooms become more than a maze. They behave like an enormous machine attempting to reconstruct human experience from corrupted information. The mistakes are the horror. Even costume design, led by Micah Cade, supports that world rather than competing with it. The clothing remains recognizably early 1990s, but muted enough to keep faces and bodies readable against the aggressive wallpaper. Clark's pirate persona adds a sad layer of manufactured theatricality. A man costumed as an adventurer while living inside commercial failure, then entering a place that turns his artificial identity into something grotesquely literal. Production design, decoration, and costume all circle the same idea. People create environments to express who they are. The backrooms absorb those expressions, remove their meaning, and return them as traps. That physical craftsmanship gives backrooms its body. But architecture alone does not determine how we experience it. The camera must decide whether a corridor feels endless or cramped, whether an empty doorway invites curiosity or announces danger, and whether the maze looks physically real or digitally impossible. Vermette constructed the nightmare. Cinematographer Jeremy Cox had to teach it how to watch us back. The camera in Backrooms faces an unusual problem. How do you photograph emptiness without making emptiness visually empty? Jeremy Cox's answer is to treat every room as a composition waiting to betray the person inside it. Doors sit too close to frame edges. Characters occupy less space than the architecture surrounding them. Corridors continue beyond where the eye expects them to stop. Cox had previously worked in the visual orbit of Osgood Perkins, shooting second unit material on Longlegs and The Monkey before serving as lead cinematographer on Keeper. That experience with controlled architectural horror made him an ideal partner for Kane Parsons. Both filmmakers understand that a room can threaten someone before anything enters it. Their visual strategy begins with separation. Outside the Backrooms, the camera is comparatively reserved. Clark's showroom, Mary's, and the other ordinary locations are photographed through stable frames and simple blocking, partly inspired by the clinical compositions of 1 Hour Photo. Cox and Parsons wanted to create an interesting image of a room, place the actors inside it, then allow behavior to generate the scene. The Backrooms receive more movement because entering them changes the film's relationship with space. Reality observes people from a distance. The maze follows them. That shift is subtle enough to feel instinctive, but it changes everything. Watch how often the characters appear small within wide compositions. A conventional horror film might push rapidly into close-ups, isolating faces and hiding whatever waits beyond the frame. Backrooms frequently keeps the surrounding geometry visible. The audience is forced to scan doorways, corners, and empty stretches of wallpaper while simultaneously reading the actor's reaction. Negative space becomes active space. Your eye keeps searching because the composition appears to be withholding something. Sometimes it is. Often it is not. That uncertainty trains the viewer to fear the entire image rather than one designated shadow. Reviews repeatedly singled out this use of wide-angle photography and close character following as central to the film's immersion. Cox also resisted the instinct to make every frame neatly symmetrical. Earlier in his career, he was drawn to placing the camera perpendicular to a back wall, flattening rooms into controlled geometric images. For Backrooms, he deliberately pushed himself toward off-center framing, slight tilts, asymmetry, and short-siding, placing a character close to the edge they are looking toward instead of giving their gaze comfortable visual space. The uniform yellow environment made that experimentation possible. Even when the camera leaned or drifted, the repeating walls maintained cohesion. The result feels organized and wrong at once, like a picture assembled according to rules that differ by a few degrees from our own. Lighting becomes even stranger because inside the main yellow labyrinth, Cox added no conventional film lights. The illumination comes from fixtures built directly into the ceiling, using Astera Titan tubes positioned behind diffusers. The placement required careful testing. Too close, and the individual tubes would announce themselves as movie equipment. Too far, and the fluorescent effect would lose its oppressive consistency. This gives the characters nowhere visually safe to hide. Shadows exist, but there is no comforting darkness. Every wall is exposed beneath flat overhead light. Horror usually promises danger in what cannot be seen. Backrooms finds danger in seeing too much and understanding none of it. The yellow required its own technical solution. The famous source image was not necessarily photographed in a room that intensely yellow. Its sickly color partly came from white balance distortion. Reproducing that effect entirely through camera settings would also contaminate skin tones, turning the actors into extensions of the wallpaper. Instead, the production made the physical walls more yellow, allowing Cox to photograph human faces with relative naturalism against an environment that remained visually diseased. This is where cinematography and production design become inseparable. The color does not merely decorate the room, it isolates flesh from architecture, making the characters look like foreign objects the space has not yet absorbed. Then the film breaks its polished feature language with found footage. Those sequences were captured on a red Komodo using a cropped Super 16 sensor mode and an 864mm zoom lens. After visual effects work was completed, the footage was transferred to VHS, while fully digital blender material went through the same degrading process. Think about the absurd technical loop: modern digital capture, computer-generated extensions, deliberate analog deterioration. The production used sophisticated tools to recreate the limitations of an amateur camcorder. That degradation is not a gimmick. Reduced clarity forces the imagination to complete shapes, hides the border between practical material and computer imagery, and reconnects the feature to Parsons' original YouTube language. Operating those sequences demanded more control than their apparent chaos suggests. Parsons had keyframed handheld movement in his animated shorts, designing camera accidents with frame-by-frame precision. Cox had to reproduce that sensation physically, while actors reacted directly to the lens. The camera stumbles, searches, and turns too late, but still lands on required story beats. It behaves like another frightened performer. Found footage often fails when every shake feels artificially planned or completely unreadable. Here the movement sits between panic and choreography. We believe the operator is losing control, even though the filmmaking never does. Visual effects extend rather than replace the sets. Parsons confirmed that most surfaces touched or walked upon were physically constructed, while Blender and digital extensions handled spaces too vast or impossible to build and joined areas spread across separate stages. That practical foundation gives the effects a stable visual grammar. The camera can pass from real carpet and walls into impossible scale without suddenly changing texture. Some images become openly surreal, architecture folding into monumental voids, human forms copied incorrectly, but the film earns those moments by first convincing us that the ordinary corridors possess weight. The unreal grows from the real instead of floating above it. Cox and Parsons never chase beauty for its own sake. Their images are too flat, too yellow, too vacant to offer conventional visual pleasure. Yet that refusal creates something more memorable: cinematography that makes the audience perform surveillance. We inspect, we anticipate, we mistrust every clean line. The camera gives the backrooms dimensions, but sound gives them presence. The electrical hum, distant impacts, and impossible silences that suggest the maze continues long after the image cuts away. Before the backrooms become visible, they become audible. A low electrical hum enters beneath the scene and refuses to leave. It is not loud enough to dominate attention, yet it changes the pressure of the room. Fluorescent lights buzz. Air seems to move through vents that may not exist. Footsteps return with slightly too much echo. Supervising sound editor and sound designer Eugenio Battaglia builds the environment from noises associated with workplaces, basements, and failing electronics, then stretches them until familiarity becomes physical discomfort. The result is not a haunted house soundtrack. It sounds like an ordinary building continuing to operate long after every human purpose has disappeared. Kane Parsons understood this sonic identity before he understood feature filmmaking. Sound had already carried much of his YouTube series: mono recordings, camera microphone distortion, heavy breathing, and the constant whir of overhead fixtures. For the movie, Parsons wanted that language preserved but widened. The found footage material retains a compressed, aged quality, while the conventional scenes expand across the theater through deeper bass and broader spatial movement. The maze no longer sounds trapped inside a camcorder. It surrounds the audience. Parsons described the feature's sound as richer and more wind-like than the shorts, while still resembling an old transmission echoing backward from the future. That contrast between small recordings and massive space is where the design becomes truly unsettling. A distant impact may arrive without a visible source. A voice seems close, then returns from somewhere impossibly far away. Long corridors distort direction, so the audience cannot confidently decide whether a sound comes from ahead, behind, or inside the walls. This is acoustic architecture, audio-defining dimensions the camera cannot show. The backrooms feel infinite because their echoes imply unseen chambers beyond every frame. Silence then becomes equally important. When the electrical bed suddenly drops away, the absence does not calm us. It means the environment has changed its behavior. Parsons co-composed the score with Ido van Bremen, who had already worked within atmospheric horror on films including The Monkey and Keeper. Parsons brought the musical instincts developed across his online projects. Van Bremen brought formal scoring experience and the ability to shape those instincts across a 110-minute feature. Their primary influences included Aphex Twin, Boards of Canada, and Burial, artists who can make electronic music feel nostalgic, mechanical, and emotionally distant at the same time. Parsons admits he lacks traditional instrumental training, describing his method less as classical composition than experimentation, finding textures, combining them, and following the emotional reaction they produce. The score rarely behaves like a traditional horror theme. Parsons said melodic material repeats clearly only once. Almost everything else continues evolving. Gentle drones widen until they become pressure. Soft tones accumulate digital scars. Bass does not always strike. It swells, suggesting something enormous moving beneath the floor. That refusal to settle into a recognizable tune matches the architecture. A melody usually promises return. Chorus, refrain, resolution. The Backrooms deny return. Their music keeps mutating just as their corridors repeat without leading back to safety. Critics repeatedly praised this combination of muted ambience, throbbing low frequencies, and unstable electronic texture. The album's quieter cues expose another side of the film. Handprint begins with a delicate arpeggio that almost offers comfort, while Furniture Lament transforms domestic warmth into something foggy and half-remembered. Even the track titles, Quiet Wall in Dark Room, Feeling of a Door Imminently Remembered, and Old Home Not Yet Built, sound like fragments recovered from a damaged subconscious. The music does not merely announce danger. It mourns places that never existed correctly. That emotional ambiguity matters because Clarke is not only frightened by the maze, he is drawn toward it. The score must make the Backrooms feel hostile and strangely intimate at once. Parsons and Van Bremen also understand that ugliness can be musical. Pirate Shanty, connected to Clarke's desperate furniture commercial, uses cheerful theatricality that becomes painful through context. Cafe Bossa V1 resembles anonymous waiting room music, pleasant enough to be ignored, yet eerie when detached from a functioning public space. These cues capture the film's central contradiction. Nothing is inherently frightening about retail jingles, hold music, or fluorescent noise. Remove the people those sounds were designed to serve, and they become evidence of a vanished system, still pretending everything is normal. That is pure Backrooms logic, comfort copied without understanding comfort. The end credits complete the circle with Boards of Canada's The World Becomes Flesh. The placement is more than an influential artist receiving a fashionable needle drop. Boards of Canada helped define the degraded, nostalgic electronic atmosphere Parsons was already chasing, so their music feels like a distant ancestor answering the film back. After nearly 2 hours of distorted memory, false rooms, and obsolete technology, the track arrives less like release than continuation. The movie ends. The signal remains. Sound may be the film's most effective weapon because it survives darkness, distance, and closed doors. We can look away from the yellow walls. We cannot stop hearing the hum. Yet those carefully engineered noises were created through a production that moved from teenage bedroom experiments to 4 sound stages, an enormous practical maze, and a compressed professional schedule. The finished atmosphere feels effortless, making it was anything but. The strangest moment in the making of Backrooms did not involve a difficult stunt or malfunctioning visual effect. It happened when Kane Parsons walked into a place he already knew. For years, he had navigated those yellow corridors inside Blender, moving virtual cameras through rooms that existed only as geometry on a computer. Then a professional crew built them around him. Parsons described the experience as crossing into a familiar location that had never previously existed. No psychological distance, no feeling of looking at a replica. The walls from his screen were suddenly solid. He could touch them, walk between them, get lost inside his own imagination. For a filmmaker whose entire mythology concerns reality becoming physically unstable, the production itself began with a real version of that sensation. The road to that soundstage had moved almost violently fast. Parsons uploaded his first Backrooms film in 2022 at 16, met James Wan remotely after its viral rise, and visited the set of Night Swim in 2023 when he was 17. Within a few years, he was directing Chiwetel Ejiofor, Renate Reinsve, and Mark Duplass on an A24-backed feature involving 21 Laps, Atomic Monster, Chernin Entertainment, and producer Osgood Perkins. That kind of leap usually produces a comforting publicity narrative about mentorship. Parsons' version is messier and more revealing. He remained anxious that his age and lack of professional set experience would cause him to violate some invisible rule of filmmaking etiquette. His answer was preparation so exhaustive that uncertainty had nowhere to hide. He shot-listed the entire feature in Blender, not rough storyboards. Not a handful of digital concept images. Parsons built environments, positioned virtual cameras, and explored how scenes might unfold before physical construction was complete. Cinematographer Jeremy Cox entered that digital workspace with him, adjusting the architecture to strengthen specific compositions. A corridor could widen because a lens needed room to breathe. A wall could shift because a character's placement felt more disturbing off-center. Production design and cinematography were therefore developing simultaneously rather than waiting for one department to finish before the other began. The sets were not passive locations later photographed by the camera. They were partially sculpted by the images the camera intended to make. Parsons' first idealized map covered around 100,000 square feet and was so large that it crashed production designer Danny Vermette's computer. Reality eventually reduced the build to roughly 30,000 square feet across 4 Vancouver soundstages, still an enormous footprint for a film centered on deliberately empty rooms. Vermette's crew raised platforms, inserted dead ends, created steep floors, and layered the construction vertically, so performers would not merely walk through interchangeable corridors. They would climb, duck, hesitate, and physically negotiate the architecture. The build developed over several months while exterior material was being filmed. When Parsons returned to the completed maze, years of solitary digital work had become a collaborative industrial object surrounding him from every direction. The transition from one-person animation to a full crew could easily have broken his authority. Parsons was accustomed to controlling every pixel himself. A feature requires hundreds of people to interpret decisions through separate crafts, schedules, and practical limitations. Producer Chris Ferguson helped configure the Vancouver production around Parsons' unusual process, while Perkins functioned as what Parsons called a creative defense, someone who understood the source material and protected its artistic character. Parsons also knew when to defer. That balance is the real behind-the-scenes achievement. He did not attempt to prove authorship by rejecting professional expertise. He supplied clear answers about the world, then allowed specialists to solve the physical problems he had never previously encountered. And those problems were wonderfully specific. The team tested roughly 40 wallpaper versions before finding a shade that reproduced the digital image through a camera. Thousands of square feet of carpet had to remain consistent across separate stages. Ceiling fixtures needed to provide usable photographic light while still resembling hostile office fluorescence. Portal crossings were designed for as much in-camera execution as possible, forcing departments to coordinate walls, platforms, actor movement, and lens position with mechanical precision. Even locating suitable 1990s furniture became difficult because the pieces had to look period correct yet new enough to belong on a showroom floor. Mundane objects required obsessive labor. That is the delicious irony of Backrooms. An army of craftspeople worked to create the sensation that no intelligent designer had ever touched the place. The maze then started doing part of the directing. Chiwetel Ejiofor admitted that he became lost while attempting to cross the set toward catering, especially during the earliest days of filming. Crew members experienced the same disorientation. Renate Reinsve said she never felt completely at ease inside the environment, and its uninterrupted corridors gave the performances a physical uncertainty that could not be recreated by asking actors to stare at green screens. The practical build imposed genuine distance between people. A performer disappearing around a corner could actually vanish from another actor's sight. Footsteps could come from connected rooms. Wrong turns remained possible. The production did not merely provide scenery for fear. It manufactured conditions in which mild confusion was always available. Parsons' youth also changed the emotional atmosphere around the work. Ejiofor initially assumed that some physical version of the Backrooms must have existed before, because the original shorts felt so tactile. Discovering that Parsons had created them digitally, and watching the director's delight as the sets came alive, gave the veteran actor another way into the project. Mark Duplass later pushed back publicly against speculation that Parsons had served merely as a youthful figurehead, stating that the director was fully in control. That defense matters because Hollywood has a long habit of celebrating young creators while quietly suggesting adults must have performed the real work. Here, experienced collaborators consistently described preparedness, technical fluency, and command, not a studio machine concealing an overwhelmed novice. Preparation did not eliminate improvisation. It created room for it. Because Parsons and Cox could examine scenes virtually before shooting, they could reshape physical areas while construction continued. Because the actors were surrounded by real walls, reactions could emerge from movement rather than being calculated in isolation. Because the maze occupied multiple stages, visual effects could concentrate on joining spaces and extending scale instead of inventing every surface from nothing. That workflow preserved the rough, handmade DNA of the YouTube films even as the project gained studio resources. Bigger did not have to mean cleaner. More expensive did not have to mean safer. The production used professional machinery to protect the uncomfortable imperfection that made the original phenomenon spread. The making of Backrooms therefore mirrors its story. An individual constructs a private world, other people enter it, and the structure grows beyond the scale anyone originally imagined. The difference is that this maze led somewhere very real, a theatrical release carrying enormous expectations from both established horror audiences and millions of online viewers. A24 and its partners had gambled on a first-time director, an abstract internet mythology, and 30,000 square feet of yellow uncertainty. Once the doors opened, that gamble stopped being a production story and became a financial one, and the numbers would turn Parsons' improbable debut into something even Hollywood could not dismiss. The most astonishing number attached to Backrooms is not its worldwide gross. It is $10 million. That was the reported production budget for a film containing 4 soundstages, a 30,000-square-foot practical labyrinth, Oscar-nominated actors, and extensive digital environments. In modern studio terms, $10 million is not blockbuster money. It is risk management money, the kind of controlled investment that allows an unusual horror concept to succeed without needing universal appeal. A24 and Chernin Entertainment did not require Kane Parsons to deliver Marvel-sized revenue. Then the movie opened like one. By June 18, 2026, Backrooms had earned approximately $168 million domestically and between $265 million and $270 million worldwide, depending on reporting updates between box office trackers. The warning signs, or promises, arrived on Thursday night. Preview screenings generated an estimated $10.4 million, an extraordinary figure for an original R-rated science fiction horror film. Friday's total reached $38, $4 million when previews were included. By the end of its first domestic weekend, Backrooms had collected $81.4 million from 3,442 theaters, averaging roughly $23,650 per location. The global launch reached about $118 million. For perspective, A24's previous opening weekend record belonged to Alex Garland's Civil War with $25.5 million. Backrooms did not narrowly improve that record. It earned more than 3 times as much. That opening tells us something more interesting than young people bought tickets. Parsons had spent years building audience trust before A24 sold a single seat. His YouTube series accumulated hundreds of millions of views across its videos and surrounding online conversation, while Backrooms imagery spread independently through TikTok, Reddit, games, and fan-made lore. The movie therefore arrived as an original film in franchise clothing. It had no previous theatrical installment and no traditional intellectual property owner guiding audience expectations, yet millions of viewers already recognized the yellow wallpaper. Hollywood usually pays enormous sums to purchase that level of awareness. Parsons had generated it through short-form filmmaking, mystery, and community participation. The release date amplified that advantage. A24 opened the film wide on May 29, positioning it as a genuine summer attraction rather than a small genre picture waiting for word of mouth. The strategy was aggressive. More than 3,400 domestic theaters, premium showtimes, and marketing built around imagery rather than lengthy plot explanation. Sell the doorway, sell the hum, sell the fear of getting lost. That campaign allowed longtime followers to recognize the mythology, while newcomers could understand the premise instantly. You did not need to know async or watch Parsons' web series. You only needed to imagine stepping through a wall and never finding the way back. Its second weekend brought the inevitable correction. Domestic revenue fell approximately 68% to $26.3 million. That is a steep drop, especially for a movie whose opening promised such extraordinary momentum. But context matters. Horror films with enormous fan-driven premieres often decline sharply because their most committed viewers arrive immediately. Backrooms had already earned $109.1 million domestically during its first full week, crossing $100 million on its sixth day and overtaking Marty Supreme as A24's highest-grossing domestic release. The drop did not transform success into disappointment. It merely confirmed that the film behaved like an event-driven genre release rather than a slow-building crossover drama. The third weekend added another $11.5 million domestically, a decline of roughly 56%, bringing the domestic total past $160 million. By June 18, the film stood at $167.9 million in North America. International reporting ranged from approximately $97.5 million to $102.3 million, creating the small difference between the major worldwide totals. Either figure placed the movie above $265 million globally and made it A24's biggest worldwide theatrical release to that point. Less than 2 weeks after opening, it had already passed the studio's previous worldwide leader, Marty Supreme. Profit cannot be calculated by subtracting $10 million from the box office. Theaters retain a significant portion of ticket sales, international revenue returns at different rates, and the publicly reported production budget does not include the full marketing campaign. Those expenses were not disclosed in the available reporting. Even with those cautions, the commercial outcome is enormous. A worldwide gross more than 26 times the stated production cost gives the financiers considerable room to cover advertising, distribution, and exhibitor shares while still producing a major return. Streaming rights, premium rentals, physical media, and possible franchise development would sit beyond the theatrical gross. Yet the largest impact may be institutional rather than financial. Backrooms proved that an online creator could bring a pre-existing visual language into theaters without sanding away everything that made it strange. It also strengthened a broader 2026 horror pattern alongside films such as Obsession and Iron Lung. Filmmakers who established audiences online could convert direct viewer relationships into theatrical demand. The lesson for studios is tempting. Search YouTube for the next inexpensive phenomenon. The real lesson is harder. Parsons did not succeed merely because he had followers. He succeeded because audiences recognized authorship. They believed the feature would contain the same imagination that drew them to the shorts. Numbers this large change how a movie is discussed. Backrooms stopped being framed as a risky experiment by a 20-year-old and became evidence that theatrical horror could emerge from internet culture, reject traditional development pipelines, and still outperform far more expensive properties. But commercial victory does not settle artistic debate. An opening weekend measures anticipation. The weeks afterward measure satisfaction only imperfectly. Critics and audiences still had to decide whether Parsons had expanded his mysterious yellow corridors or simply made them bigger. The critical surprise of Backrooms was not that reviewers admired its sets. Anyone who saw the trailers could tell the Yellow Labyrinth had been constructed with unusual care. The surprise was how many critics accepted the film's refusal to behave like a normal horror story. As of June 20, 2026, it holds an 89% Rotten Tomatoes score from 239 reviews, with an average rating of 7.5 out of 10. Metacritic records a 77 from 44 critics, placing the response firmly in generally favorable territory. Those are remarkable numbers for an abstract, slow-burning feature directed by a 20-year-old whose previous work lived primarily on YouTube. The praise kept returning to the same achievement: atmosphere sustained through restraint. Critics admired the way Kane Parsons weaponized negative space, fluorescent lighting, and architectural repetition without turning the movie into a continuous parade of creatures and jump scares. Rotten Tomatoes consensus calls the film an assured debut that converts the internet's liminal spaces into something both mesmerizing and frightening. Reviews from Roger Ebert. Com and Slash Film similarly emphasize the communal tension of the theatrical experience, the strange pleasure of sitting among hundreds of people who are all searching the same empty doorway for movement. The film does not always frighten through events. It frightens through anticipation becoming exhausting. Production design, sound, and cinematography received the least divided admiration. Even negative reviews struggled to dismiss the physical world Parsons and his collaborators created. The maze appears simultaneously tangible and impossible, while its audiovisual texture gives bland office architecture the force of a hostile organism. Critics praised the wide compositions, practical corridors, restrained visual effects, and the electrical soundscape that seems to vibrate beneath every scene. This agreement matters because it establishes Parsons as more than a creator with a marketable concept. The response recognized an actual visual author, someone capable of transferring a homemade digital language into a feature without losing its identity. Then the divide opens. The screenplay became the pressure point. William Bibbiani's review for Therap admired the production design, but argued that the characters, psychology, and mythology never form a coherent, dramatic whole. Other mixed reviews reached similar conclusions. The film is gripping whenever Parsons lets viewers wander through the environment, weaker whenever dialogue tries to explain Clark's emotional condition or Mary's trauma. That criticism cuts directly into the adaptation's central compromise. The original videos could remain fragments. A theatrical feature needed a narrative, yet the more structure the filmmakers added, the more some viewers felt the mystery shrinking beneath conventional character writing. That does not mean critics wanted more answers. Quite the opposite. Many of the strongest reviews celebrated the film for resisting definitive explanation. They appreciated that Asink's research never turns the Backrooms into a solved scientific phenomenon, and that the finale preserves interpretive uncertainty. The frustration came from an awkward middle position, enough psychology to invite close examination, but not always enough development to make every emotional conclusion convincing. Enough mythology to suggest a larger system, but not enough to satisfy viewers approaching the movie as a puzzle. The film asks to be felt and decoded simultaneously. Depending on your patience, that tension is either its greatest strength or the point where the walls begin closing in. Audience response was warmer than hostile, though noticeably less enthusiastic than the critics. Rotten Tomatoes currently lists a 74% verified audience score from more than 5,000 ratings, while opening night moviegoers gave it a B- cinema score. That is not rejection. For an ambiguous experimental horror film marketed as a major summer event, it indicates a sharp split between viewers who embraced the experience and those who expected a more conventional payoff. Audience comments repeatedly praised the atmosphere, performances, and faithfulness to Parsons' web series. Complaints focused on slow pacing, limited character progression, unclear meaning, and an ending that supplied more questions than closure. The distinction between fans and newcomers proved less predictable than expected. Existing followers enjoyed recognizing async, the found footage language, and the larger mythology, but some also resisted changes to Parsons' established canon. New viewers lacked that baggage, yet several felt the movie assumed familiarity it had not earned. Others discovered the shorts only after leaving the theater. That circular movement, from YouTube to cinema and back to YouTube, is culturally important. The feature did not replace its online source. It sent millions of people toward it, transforming the original videos into something between prequel, companion piece, and archaeological record. A stranger debate formed around Parsons himself. Sections of the online audience speculated that a 20-year-old could not truly have controlled a production this large, suggesting producer Osgood Perkins or more experienced crew members must have secretly directed substantial portions. No credible evidence supported that claim, and collaborators, including Mark Duplass, publicly defended Parsons' authorship. The suspicion exposes an uncomfortable industry bias. Hollywood celebrates young talent rhetorically, then struggles to believe that talent could exercise real authority. Parsons' age became part of the reception because viewers were not only evaluating the movie, they were evaluating whether its existence seemed possible. The film's commercial success pushed that conversation beyond horror fandom. Reporting on Backrooms and Curry Barker's Obsession framed both movies as proof that digital creators can develop craft and audience relationships outside traditional studios, then bring those viewers into theaters. Executives began discussing online platforms not merely as marketing channels, but as public development laboratories where filmmakers refine ideas through direct audience response. That interpretation risks producing a wave of cynical creepypasta acquisitions. Followers alone do not create cinematic identity. Parsons succeeded because years of online experimentation taught him exactly what his imagery could do. No meaningful long-term critical verdict can exist only 3 weeks after release, and the major awards cycle remains ahead. Still, the immediate cultural result is clear. Backrooms has already become a test case for internet-born cinema, praised as sensory filmmaking, criticized as incomplete drama, and debated as evidence of a generational shift in who gets to direct large-scale movies. The disagreement suits the film. Everyone enters the same rooms. Nobody agrees on what they contain. To understand why that ambiguity feels so powerful, and why Clark seems almost relieved to disappear inside it, we finally have to confront the themes beneath the wallpaper. Full spoilers from this point onward. The Backrooms are not hell in the religious sense. They are something more disturbing, a purgatory humanity built for itself. Drop ceilings, synthetic carpet, fluorescent panels, and cheaply partitioned walls were created for efficiency, yet stripped of workers and purpose, they become monuments to spiritual exhaustion. Kane Parsons has described the concept as reacting to industrial monoculture, the way functional architecture increasingly separates people from environments the human nervous system evolved to inhabit. That gives the film's yellow maze its deeper power. It is not an alien world invading ours. It is our world, emptied of excuses. Clark recognizes that emptiness because he already lives inside it. His furniture showroom imitates domestic comfort without containing a home, just as his pirate commercials imitate confidence while concealing humiliation. The Backrooms offer him endless versions of the same arrangement. Rooms shaped like human life but missing whatever makes life meaningful. Instead of recoiling, he feels understood. The maze converts his disappointment into architecture. Every corridor says that movement is possible. None permits genuine progress. Clark has spent years doing exactly that, revisiting his failed career and marriage, rearranging the story, always returning to the same emotional room. Memory becomes the film's central monster. The Backrooms appear capable of absorbing human experiences and reconstructing them incorrectly, producing furniture fused with walls, distorted domestic spaces, and human-like still lifes, whose forms resemble recollections degraded through endless repetition. The finale confirms that Mary's memories are also entering the system. Her childhood room, the async facility, and finally a malformed version of Mary herself appear within the maze. These are not perfect copies because memory never preserves reality perfectly. It preserves an impression, then unknowingly alters that impression each time it is recalled. Clark mistakes those replicas for salvation. Surrounded by motionless imitations, including a figure apparently modeled after his estranged wife, he can occupy a family scene where nobody argues, contradicts him, or leaves. He even consumes pieces of the creatures, a grotesque image of nostalgia feeding upon itself. Clark does not want his past restored accurately. Accurate memory would force him to acknowledge his selfishness. He wants a controllable reconstruction in which he remains the wounded hero. That is why Mary's confrontation finally reaches him. She refuses his therapeutic role play and names what the maze has allowed him to avoid. His life did not simply happen to him. His choices helped destroy it. For one brief moment, Clark chooses reality. He releases Mary, but recognition arrives too late. Captain Clark, the gigantic deformation of his furniture store mascot, kills him almost immediately. The symbolism is viciously precise. Clark is destroyed by the false identity he created to survive commercial failure. The cheerful pirate adventurer stretched into an obscene monument to denial. The Backrooms do not punish him with an unfamiliar demon. They enlarge his performance until it becomes stronger than the person underneath. He spent years pretending to be someone else, then entered a world where imitation acquires flesh. His mask does not fall away. It eats him. Mary survives because her relationship with memory differs from Clark's. She carries a fragment of concrete from her demolished childhood home, an object that could represent the same nostalgic imprisonment. But she uses it as a weapon against Captain Clark. That action separates remembering from retreating. Clark tries to live inside a manufactured past. Mary takes something from her past and uses it to continue moving. Trauma does not vanish, and the film never offers the cheap promise that confronting it produces instant healing. Instead, memory becomes material. Heavy, painful, useful. She cannot return home, but she can decide what the remains of that home will do. Then async appears, and escape becomes another illusion. Mary reaches what resembles institutional safety, only to discover that Phil and his researchers cannot explain the dimension they monitor. Their cameras, protective suits, and technical vocabulary create the appearance of control, but the company remains fundamentally ignorant. Async began as an MRI manufacturer, a business devoted to imaging the hidden interior of the human body, before dedicating itself to an environment that may externalize the hidden interior of the mind. That parallel is too elegant to ignore. The institution can observe the phenomenon, catalog it, and contain fragments of it. Understanding remains beyond reach. The final image of the replicated Mary makes the ending more unsettling than a simple sequel hook. Perhaps Async rescued the real woman. Perhaps the interrogation room itself is another imitation. Either way, observation has become contamination. The Backrooms now possess Mary's memories, including memories formed after her supposed escape. That suggests the maze is not limited by normal geography. Once someone enters it, the connection may persist wherever they go. The place does not merely copy rooms. It learns the relationships between rooms, people, and fears, then returns them as approximations. Every attempt to understand it gives it more human material from which to build. There is an unavoidable contemporary reading here. The misshapen bodies and corrupted rooms resemble machine-generated images, recognizable elements arranged by a system that can reproduce surfaces without comprehending lived meaning. Critics have connected the film's imagery to generative AI slop, although Parsons leaves the metaphor open rather than turning the movie into a direct technological parable. The stronger idea is broader. Whether the copying mechanism is memory, software, capitalism, or cinema itself, replication without understanding produces something dead. A showroom is not a home. A therapeutic reenactment is not reconciliation. A human shape is not a human being. The film stumbles when it explains these ideas too directly. Mary's therapeutic function occasionally feels engineered to unlock Clark's psychology, and her own interior life receives less development than the ending demands. Clark's movement from fascination to complete surrender also skips emotional steps that Ejiofor's performance must supply. Some viewers will read the final uncertainty as profound. Others will see calculated franchise ambiguity. That criticism is fair. The screenplay does not always equal the sophistication of the imagery, and the maze is more psychologically convincing than some of the dialogue used to interpret it. Still, Backrooms succeeds where it matters most. It transforms a viral image into a cinematic grammar. Repetition, corrupted familiarity, empty corporate space, and the dread of being remembered incorrectly. It respects internet horror without treating it as disposable youth culture. And it demonstrates that large-scale filmmaking does not require abandoning the rough imagination that attracted an audience in the first place. Parsons' feature debut is imperfect, sometimes emotionally underwritten, and occasionally too pleased with its obscurity. It is also formally assured, deeply unnerving, and unmistakably authored. For viewers seeking constant creatures, clean mythology, and a fully resolved ending, the film will feel like walking for 2 hours without reaching a door. For audiences drawn to Skinamarink, David Lynch, analog horror, and stories that continue changing after the credits, that unresolved journey is the reward. My verdict, 8 out of 10. The film's narrative does not always know how to match its visual intelligence, but its best images feel like memories you cannot prove belong to you. The Backrooms are frightening because they are endless. Parsons understands something worse. Eventually, they may remember us better than we remember ourselves.